afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's panel discussion on the geospatial industry and the careers within. My name is Joe Lavodi. I'll be your host and moderator for this session. Before we dive into our discussion, I'd like to introduce our chapter of URISA, the Ohio Valley, also known as OV URISA. We serve Ohio, West Virginia, and Western PA. As a current president, my primary goal this term has been to elevate the visibility of our chapter and provide some tangible value to our members. To this end, I revived our Lunch and Learn series, focusing on geospatial careers, a topic close to me as I found myself navigating the job market during the early months of my presidency. The series has been a great success, and we hope to continue it with each incoming president. I want to introduce our dedicated officers who help make all of this possible. Matt McGuire, our vice president, Esther Amaoko, our secretary, Amy Swigart, our treasurer, and our past president, Tom Fisher. We're here today to explore various topics related to building and advancing careers in geospatial fields. Whether you're just starting out, looking to make a change, or aiming to climb higher, we hope you'll gain valuable insight from today's conversation. And now, I'm thrilled to introduce our esteemed panelists. First up to bat, Bill Hodge, former executive director of the GISCI. Bill has over 20 years of experience in the geospatial field, including roles at various government agencies. He retired as the GIS division manager for the city of Midland, Texas in 2014, but continues to contribute actively to the field. Next up, Tim Nolan, a current URISA board member known for his expertise in GIS management, particularly in local government settings. Tim has been actively involved in promoting GIS best practices and supporting professional development for geospatial professionals. Batting third, Dr. Benhart, John Benhart, professor at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater, specializing in geographical information science, spatial data analysis, and geospatial technology. Dr. Benhart helps shape the next generation of GIS professionals through both teaching and research. In batting cleanup, Nettie Giannichetti. I hope I said it right.
You said it right.
An experienced geospatial professional with a strong background in GIS project management and data analysis, recognized for her innovative contributions to geospatial solutions. And that is our panel. Today's panel consists of 1 hour of moderated questions, including some moderated follow-ups as needed, followed by a roughly 20 to 30-minute open Q&A session. During the panel, Matt McGuire will handle all the live questions through the chat. He will feed them to me through another chat. If you have a question that pertains to a particular topic, please let us know in the chat. For the Q&A, let us know if you want the question asked of all panelists or a specific panelist or two. We will do our best to get to all questions, but given the time constraints, I can't promise we'll get to all of them. So let's dive right in. I'm going to start with you, Bill. Let's talk about your career journey and how you got started in the geospatial field.
Purely by accident, and it was a serendipitous experience. Came to it in my early 40s as part of a ranch conservation plan where the local USDA office was showing ArcView 3.2a on a screen, and I said, wow, what is that? So 6 months later, I was a district tech, hooked, recognized that I needed some street creds, so I went to Penn State's online program, decided the GISP was what I needed because I have no background in geography or GIS, unlike probably every caller on this group today, certainly every professional here. And from that point on, it was just one move up from another, mainly in the government, municipal programs, worked my way into the management side. And the rest, as they say, is history, but it's still ongoing. Fully retired, active GISP, and I show up to bother people and let them remember you're lucky not to have me around on a regular basis anymore. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Thanks, Bill. Tim, your turn.
Well, unlike Bill, I think I was born this way. I think my journey started when I was 4 months old, when my family moved from New York to Texas, to Dallas. My dad worked for Braniff Airlines, and I remember as a kid flying and always wanting the window seat and just enjoying like just the land below me. And I knew I always wanted to be a geographer or a map maker or something like that. But I guess when you grow up in the 80s, in the Reagan years, it was like, well, you should study business because that's what everybody does. So it took me a little while to kind of come around, but it was one of those moments like Bill had, a serendipitous moment where I decided to break away from my biology. I was a biology student. I'm like, I'm going to take this human geography class. And I had this professor, his name's Dr. Andrew Schoolmaster, of all things, right? I mean, he was meant to be a professor. And that changed my life. That changed my trajectory. I said, this is what I want to do. My dad got onto me for like, why do you want to be a geographer? You're making so much money waiting tables. Why would you leave something like that to do whatever you think you're going to do? But I was fortunate enough to take the very first class that the University of North Texas ever taught in GIS. And I got an A in it. So I'm like, I think this is it. I think this is the thing I want to do. And that was in '89. And I was able to get this job. I know we're going to be talking about careers and things like that. And I often get people like, hey, how do you interview? I'm like, well, I haven't been on an interview since like 1992. But I have interviewed a bunch of people. So I think I can help out here. But I started off as a plot boy at the city of Arlington, changing pin plotter ink pins. But then I landed this job at Collin County, Texas, just north of Dallas. I've been here over 30 years and loved it ever since.
Thanks, Tim. Nettie.
Okay. I, like everyone else, I wasn't sure kind of what profession to go into. I knew I loved environmental resource management. I knew I loved the outdoors. However, I grew up in a family where my father owned a shoe store. So my high school years and early college years, I was working for Gino Shoe Store. And I knew at that moment I did not want to wait on people and measure feet for the rest of my life. I wanted to be outside. I did not want to work weekends. And I knew that what I didn't want to do. I wasn't sure what I did want to do, but I did know I had the love for the outdoors, and I rode horses. And my mom was jogging one day and came across a fellow that worked for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. And he said, we're going to get her an internship, have her apply. So at the time, I was a Penn State student, and I was in environmental resource management. I had an opportunity with the DEP, had an internship, waste management. They handed me a GPS receiver in 1997, said, go out to all these landfills and mark down the coordinates, bring them back, and enter them into this Excel spreadsheet. And from there, I was like, this is exactly what I want to do the rest of my life. So I went back to Penn State my junior year. I was in the College of ERM thinking that was GIS. I found out that was in the College of Ag. And I was in classes with farmers, and I just did not feel like I was in the right spot. And I went to my counselor and said, where are all the cool people with GIS and GPS and space and satellites? And she looked at me like I had three heads and said, obviously not here. Why don't you try the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences? And when I went to the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, I instantly knew there were all of my people, and I dropped all of my credits in environmental resource management and picked up 22 credits in GIS, geography. She said, what kind of geography do you want to study? There's environmental, there's human, do you want to be a teacher, or digital geography back then? And I said, well, I guess computer digital geography. So I had to get permission from all the teachers to drop credits, add all new credits, and from there it was smooth sailing, and I'll never look back.
All right. Dr. Benhart, how did you get your start?
Well, thanks for asking, Joe. It's interesting, since I'm pretty old, I actually like Tim. I always loved geography, and I was really interested in cities and the structure of cities, and so when I, as an undergraduate, I was studying urban planning, and decided to go because of my interest in cities. Decided to go to graduate school. Fortunate enough to get an offer to go to graduate school at the University of Miami, Department of Geography, Miami, Florida, because I wanted to study, a dynamic city in a dynamic city. And the fortunate part is they were just starting to implement automated mapping and the infancy of GIS platforms and sort of like Bill, I was like, well, that's cool. But some of my colleagues really weren't that interested in it. So I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I said, I want to do that. And so I became, like the burgeoning GIS lab manager, and so I was sort of able to get in on the ground floor when not a lot of people were doing this, and to be able to, to learn. But I guess the irony of that is I wasn't really going to the University of Miami to do that. It just was happening in the department. So there's some serendipity there, some being fortunate of being in sort of the right place at the right time. And then because I had a really high level of interest in it, discovered that at the University of Miami, I went on to the University of Tennessee for my PhD. I didn't know that I wanted to get involved in what I'm doing as a faculty member. In fact, I was pretty sure I didn't want to do that. But you apply, you get offers, and I was really fortunate to show up at the University of Tennessee and get to work with a brilliant guy named Bruce Ralston. He's a geographer at the University of Tennessee. He's writing his own network analysis software. Really, that's what he was interested in, was network analysis and solving network problems. And so I got to work under him, and initially felt like a total idiot because he was so good. But I learned a ton from him. Got involved in some projects. He was hired as a consultant by the country of Bangladesh and what were at that time called the SADC countries, South African Development Coordination Conference. They were the countries that were north of the Republic of South Africa. It was still an apartheid state at that time. And I was able to work on those projects with him and just learn a ton. And so when I came out, I was trying to get faculty jobs. I actually wanted to move back to Pennsylvania. That's where I'm from. My family's from Pittsburgh. But by that time, there were institutions wanting to hire people to do this. And so I showed up here, and they needed to build a geospatial program, and I was fortunate enough to work with knowledgeable people who gave me the background to do that. And I've been here for this is my 30th year at IUP, which is sort of crazy, but I get to work with students who are going to go out and do the work we're going to be talking about. I'll stop it there. But I didn't have a big plan to do it, that's for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Benhart. It's just wild, the very journeys that everybody gets on, that leads us to where we're at. I'm going to throw this out to all of you. If you had to pick a pivotal moment that significantly impacted your career and helped drive you, what would that be? Dr. Benhart?
Well, I can pick two, and they're related to what I just said, and I'll try to keep it brief. One was when I was at the University of Miami, and they were sort of saying, "Hey, we're doing this stuff." I said I want to do it, even though I, didn't know a lot about it at that time. And the second one was whenever I got up enough, whatever you want to call it, to approach Bruce Ralston and tell him I wanted to work with him, because I was honestly intimidated and scared to do that. And a lot of people were running for the hills because they knew, if you didn't do good work for him, you were going to get trashed. He's not a mean person, but he's doesn't suffer fools. And me doing that and sort of taking a route that I knew would be the harder route, those were the two moments, because they ended up making, it put me in a position to do this.
Thank you. Natty?
A pivotal moment for me was earning that internship, and attending Penn State, and I'll never forget with David DiBiase when I discovered that I was going to take GIS for class, and he just literally opened his arms and said, "Come with me," and it was just from that moment on. My first class, he also spoke about the do's and don'ts of online etiquette, which he coined as netiquette, and so that's where my Twitter name and my handle Netiquette comes from, because my first class, mapping the world 121 GIS, I mean, it was the online do's and don'ts, and that's when email and everything just started becoming digital. So, I got my first email address at Penn State, and just from there, being surrounded by professionals in this digital industry that was about to take off, I just followed and stayed on course with it, and you just have to just keep changing with the technology as it moves. So internships are a blessing for sure, because they're going to let you know what you do or don't want to do.
Yeah, for sure. Tim.
So I put some thought into this. So I'd been at this Collin County for a year. And so if you can imagine, like when I got here, we had servers, everything was in boxes. So we had to kind of figure out how all that stuff and I'll even admit I was a little underqualified for my job. So I had to sort of figure it out as I went along. But we had a tornado come through because it's Texas, and it was on Mother's Day. And they needed to know like where the damage was, what happened, the path, and all of this. And I worked with our fire marshal who was in a helicopter, and we just sat down and kind of digitized what we thought the path of the tornado was, even though it wasn't perfect. It was something. This is in 1993. And what I remember the most is I was not on TV, but my map was. So the governor of Texas was like pointing to my map. I'm like, oh, look at me. This is the greatest moment of my professional career. But I think that was pivotal because we were able to show really early on in my career on how GIS can help others, how we can use it to really help solve some problems and really understand the situation. And that was, not that I like encourage tornadoes happening, but it just I happened to be here. My stuff was kind of set up. I had to go find data to show it because we didn't have data for that particular region at the time. So all that was part of it, just figuring out how to, in a crisis, how do you find the stuff you need to get it to the people that need it?
How about you, Bill?
This is pretty incredible. There were two events that happened, one a thing and one a person. And I need to comment for a moment to the folks listening in. This is unrehearsed. We have not talked together about what we're doing here. Nettie, I'm incredibly impressed that your name matches my name. When I initially tripped over that line segment in the USDA office while they were doing heads-up digitizing, and that caught my attention into GIS, and I started doing that heads-up digitizing, I recognized this program is capable of so much more than, I don't know what I'm doing here. I looked around for a program so that I could have some kind of focused education, searched for a year, came across the Penn State online program in the name of David DiBiase. Once I looked at David, I saw that he had advertised their certification program as taking care of the education portion of the GISP. What is this thing? Oh, a professional certification. I could use that. I'm a nobody. I want to be a somebody. I want to be a contender. So David, I followed in his footsteps in building that program. And then I started looking at wherever David was going to go, I'm going to follow and do what he does. That's my claim to success right there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Incredible stories.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I thank you all for sharing all those tidbits about yourself so that everybody gets a little understanding of, how you got to be where you are. So let's get into a little bit more detailed questions here. I think this one's right up your alley, Dr. Benhart. How important is having a formal education in GIS versus gaining experience through internships or self-study?
Well, I would say, Nettie already mentioned internship. I think I'll start by saying I think they're very important. I think having practical experience is very important. Now, what I'll say is this: obviously, I'm biased, and we're providing, we're providing formal geospatial education here, and I do that as part of my living. But I'll say this: what I find is sometimes students are, and it could be in our program or in other programs, they're asked to do things, let's say an internship, things that need to be done, right, at a state agency or and in that environment, they need for interns to be open to learning, and they also need them to have some level of productivity, right? We have to get, you're being hired as an intern to get things done. I think the formal education part provides a knowledge base and a conceptual basis for gaining understanding of what GISs do, like what functionality do they perform, right? And I think that provides two upsides. One is you're filling the gaps, right? You're not just being asked to do this or that particular thing or a set of 2 or 3 things because they need to be done in a short time frame. You're getting to get more of a holistic exposure to what geographic information science and geographic information systems are. And then the second, I think, upside of the formal education is that conceptual basis helps you grasp and sort of see through, individual software platforms or suites, right? It should make it, if you understand what GISs do and what their core sets of functionality are, then you should be able to pick up new versions of things very quickly, and it shouldn't matter whether you're using this software or that software, right? You know what they do, and you start looking for how to do those things. And I think that's the value of some level of formal education is that you have that basis for being a knowledgeable user of GIS. And then also, one thing I tell my students, in fact, I just told them yesterday, if you want a short-term reason to listen to what I'm talking about when I talk about, ellipsoids and datums and coordinates, 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional coordinate systems, the short-term payoff is it'll be way easier for you to use the software because the people who wrote that software are assuming that you know those things. Stop there.
Good point. Good point. Bill, your thoughts on that? Since you managed the GICI there.
I am in firm agreement with everything that John just said. I would contend that in today's world of GIS technology and all of its integrated and fractured components, and yes, they're both as we continue to move forward, and as the technology explodes, I would submit that you cannot be an accomplished GIS professional at the highest level of your game unless you have some kind of formal education in a staged capacity upon which to build. That education can be wide, it can be small. There is no substitute for self-learning after that fact, but you will never be able to demonstrate your degree of proficiency or your learning to an employer except with that documentable foundation and that education coupled or capstoned by an intern program, which I consider an invaluable part of your progress. That is the way to make your life so much easier. Otherwise, you're moving helter-skelter through a world trying to put bits and pieces together, and it will be a fragmentary capability by the time you've reached the end of your journey. Some kind of a scripted foundation is invaluable and inevitable for you to be a true professional in an accomplished manner.
Wow. Yeah. Impressive. I would have to say I agree with all of that.
Mhm.
So I'm going to throw this one to Nettie and Tim in particular. And Tim, from your point of view of interviewing a lot of people, even though you said you haven't interviewed a lot, but you've done a lot of interviewing, so this might be interesting coming from you. What advice do you have for making the transition from a GIS analyst or entry-level position to a leadership position? Not just moving up as an analyst, a tech, and staying in there, but actually managing a shop, becoming an administrator?
All right, so I will. I just want to address one comment here for for the person that submitted that question. Is there is a big difference, and I preach this a bunch, between leadership and management. So I think the question specifically, how do you go to a management role? Anybody can be a leader, no matter what stage you are. But to go from an analyst position to like a manager position, I would say go for it. If the opportunity arises, whether you think, I'm not going to say fake it till you make it, but I'm like, you have done enough, either with your background, the work you've done, if this is within the same agency, or often what people do is they'll move to get a raise, they'll actually leave the agency they work for to go get another higher paying position somewhere else. And what I advise all is just, if nothing else, apply for the job, get the interview, and even if you don't feel you're qualified, at least learn from the interview, right? You interview them. You kind of decide, is this the kind of place I want to be? And you never know, right? You never know that they may be able to, like, this is the kind of person we want. Like, what I try to do is I don't really look for skill level, because you're going to learn here. If we hire you here, you need to know where the data is and how we do work and all that kind of stuff. What I'm looking for is motivation, right? People that want to learn, people that want to be at this place. So I'm looking maybe at a deeper level than just like what your resume says. The resume helps you get in, but once you have a chance, and maybe we'll talk about some of the other questions, it's how humane you are, right? How you actually deal with other people is really, really important. And at least in my world, because it's a county, it's public, it's a local government, that's who we deal with. So I'm always looking for, well, I guess to specifically answer the question is, apply even if you don't think you're good enough or you're qualified enough, because you might just be. We're always harder on ourselves than others. So think before you take that interview, just ask yourself, would I tell someone else not to interview this? And you probably never would. So don't be so hard on yourself, and just try, and then learn from the interview once you get there.
Nettie, as someone who has worked up through the ranks yourself, what's your advice?
My advice is to save everything, save all of the work that you have done, because when you go to that employer, they're going to want to see your portfolio. So start building your portfolio when you are, in high school. 4-H was my first, entry on my first resume for my first job. Out of Penn State, my first job happened to be in New York City working for Urban Data Solutions. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. We were building 3D models of all the major cities of the United States. I was part of just building the data and attaching pictures to attributes in ArcView 3.2, and I didn't have a data set or maps or anything to share to my next employer when I left Urban Data when they closed. However, 9/11 surfaced, and like Tim said, all of the 3D models that we've built at Urban Data Solutions were on the cover of CNN magazine and on all the news stations showing all the degrees of the buildings that got burned. And I was like, oh my God, Mom, Dad, that's my data. That's what I did. I didn't produce those exact models, but I was part of the building process. So I saved every one of those magazines, and I have that to show that that was my first job out of Penn State, was at Urban Data Solutions. This is a sample of what we built. Save everything, every PDF, every final project map you made, every certificate that you earn, and build your portfolio from there to show your employer that you are worth it. And you might not know that job at the time, but you will learn. Like Tim said, they will teach you. And if you're passionate and you show that you've been in the industry and you've saved everything and you're organized, because GIS is about organization and data management, they will see that, and you will land that job because of your passion and your organization and your skills.
Thank you, Nettie. You are so right about the organization side of things. That's all we do is organize the data. Not all we do, but a big portion of it.
Hmm.
So, as someone entering the geospatial industry, what do you think are the key skills or certifications that are critical? And I think Dr. Benhart, you're the one sending them out into the geospatial world.
Well, thanks for the question, Joe. I mean, one thing I'll preface my comments by saying, you know, at our in our universities and our institutions that are preparing professionals for geospatial fields, we need to constantly be monitoring what, you know, you all want, right? What are employers looking for? And that's something that, you know, requires networking and requires, you know, not just structuring courses that have, you know, conceptual things in it. So having said, you know, we need to always be thinking about that. But having said that, I think I gave an indication. One of the things I find, we have to give students the conceptual grounding in what spatial data is, what it's predicated on, what its characteristics are. I think we owe them that foundation, right? And all these changes that have taken place, you know, from having your data, all this local data, and how slow our computing platforms were, and to widely distributed networks in cloud computing. That stuff doesn't change. And then, you know, now I really feel like, and I will say, I tell my students now about GSCI and thinking while they're here about becoming GIST. They have to have professional experience, right? They can get some of that through internships. They won't be able to achieve that, you know, when they're here. But we're telling them about it because our field didn't used to have a professional certification, right? And I think it's been very positive that we now do have that, because let's face it, when others are looking at our profession and trying to ascertain whether people have the qualifications that are necessary, this is very helpful, and I think it lends credibility to our field. But I really feel like our students should be coming out with Python programming skills. You know, so we need to give them that conceptual basis and what spatial data is. Yes, we need to teach them what the core functionality of GIS and remote sensing platforms are, right? I really feel like they need to have exposure to, you know, we want a minimum of some base level Python programming skills, and then, you know, helping them understand that the new platforms that data is coming from. We happen to have a uncrewed aircraft systems program at my university, and then we have a geospatial intelligence program where, you know, data is obtained from other sources like social media and phone platforms. So I'll stop there, but those are the things that come to mind.
Thank you, Dr. Benhart. Tim, you do a lot of hiring.
You're right.
So, as somebody, what's that?
No, I'm agreeing with you. Yes.
Okay. So, as you're looking at people coming into the industry, whether it's a student fresh out or somebody jumping ship, you know, because the grass is greener on our side, of course.
Mm-hmm.
What essential skills and certifications do you think the students and the those transitioning into our industry should focus on?
All right. So here's what I would recommend, and this is something I've thought of for a while. So I'm in the Dallas area. There's a lot of universities. There's a lot of GIS here, and what I see when we interview students, or, you know, like Nettie said, there's portfolios, but they're all about the same project. And I find that I keep seeing, like, I'm judging based on how well I thought they did their project. And what I would recommend for all of the students listening is, if you have to do that capstone project, or if you have to do a project to get a little beyond what the other students who are also presenting the same thing, is keep doing it, right? Like, go beyond the class requirement. Take it the next step, like, either solve a problem or show how it can be solved. Do something more with this, because I think that would tell me that you care deeply about not just the coursework that you did, but like you really want this job. You really want to show off your skill set. So I think that's a practical thing that all students can do right now, is go deeper on that project that they've done for the portfolio, for the job interview. I mean, certainly turn it in for the assignment, great, but keep it going so you can share. I'll just stop there, because I think that's kind of a unique approach that all of us can do starting right now.
That's a good point there. So, Nettie, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Similar question, but what technical skills have you gained in your role, and how did you develop them?
Over the course of my career, I fastened my seatbelt and adapted to the change of this industry, because it is constantly changing. The software when I graduated at Penn State was ArcView 2.8. The following year, the graduates were graduating using ArcView 3X. We are now on ArcGIS Pro. So you have to adapt to this ever-changing technology. That if you're using Esri, there are other platforms out there, but you have to keep furthering your knowledge, advancing your skills. I recently earned my Part 107 from the FAA. I'm a certified drone pilot, so I have studied professionally for professional development, and now I fly for my current employer, NEPA Alliance. We fly transportation projects, so I figured GIS and drones go hand in hand. It gets me out into the field. So to separate me a little bit more from this amazing field of professionals that are catching up, I thought that getting certified with my Part 107 would be a great complement to the geospatial field, because you can't have drones without GIS, and they go hand in hand. So set yourself apart from others as well. Like you said, Tim, everyone's working on the same projects, same project delivery. You have to have a little bit of that extra flair to stand out and keep learning and advancing your skills and keeping up with the technology, because otherwise you're going to get left behind.
Definitely. On the topic of the technology, with Bill, with your vast experience and seeing the trends and emerging technologies, what do you think is going to have the biggest impact moving forward on our industry?
That is, how much time did you say we have here? No one can make a name for themselves or really accomplish anything in the field today without at least a beginning knowledge of programming. And that may be Python, it may be Arcade. You need to have the foundation. I took that as a manager, and I'm going to comment on that in a moment. Programmers are otherworldly beings that can do things that we mere mortals cannot. If you want to write your own ticket in the GIS world or any of the technology worlds, become a developer, programmer. The world will fall at your feet and follow you wherever you go. Non-intuitively, one of the best courses that I ever had in the beginning was an intro to project management. And if any of you are planning to move into management or are in management at the moment, that is one of the broadest and greatest courses that you could take to give you that perspective to get your head around what's going on. There's no problem with becoming an expert button pusher from an Esri software standpoint, because they are still the market leader. Coming out of school, you need a solid foundation or a solid education in the core concepts. You need to understand projections and the geodesy portion of the project. You have to have an understanding of databases and how they're structured and how the data integrates and different types of data integrate with one another. You have to understand analysis, which means you better have a course in statistics, because analysis is not just looking at the pretty colors on a map and deciding what's going on. It is getting your hand, you're developing mud puddles of data, and you're getting down and splashing in the mud like a 4-year-old used to do, or you're not dealing with the information. And you will embark on a continuous learning program, whether you do that through your own self-study, whether you pursue a certification, whether it's an ESRI technical, a GISP, any of the remote sensing or ASPRS, whatever you do, if you intend to be a continuing GIS professional, you are going to learn from one year to the next, and you will find yourself increasing, or you will be left behind. Wow, I could go on, but I'm going to shut up.
It's powerful. So, Nettie, I want your perspective on some of the challenges you have faced in your career, and in particular, being a woman in this career. So that for the other ladies on the call, I mean, I can only attest to my personal experiences. While misogyny is everywhere, I have never really come across it too much in our industry. That's just from my perspective. I do not know what it's like from you, and I would love to hear from you, your perspective on being a female in this industry and just any other challenges that have come up for you.
That is a damn good question. Well done, Joe.
That's a great question, Joe. I wouldn't see it as a challenge. I see it as an opportunity. When I first started out in GIS, the conferences that I would attend, there were no women in the bathroom. I never had to wait in line. And all of the men's bathrooms, they had lines. So I find that as a win. As I'm going to conferences in 2020, 24 now, there are women everywhere. So it has caught up. I'm not a minority. We are not a minority in this industry anymore. It has definitely changed, and I've always embraced it. I was a tomboy, still, I guess, am, and I loved being surrounded by men in the field and women, and I think it's a compliment to women who are in the field having this opportunity to be surrounded by and be somewhat of a minority. But at this day and age, I think it has caught up, and it's definitely a 50-50. And in the drone industry, in aviation, I feel it's definitely, we are definitely the 3% minority. Women pilots are 3% out there. So, and that over time is also going to change. So it's just the balance of life, and it's an opportunity. It's not a challenge.
Do you ever feel any kind of pushback or anything as that minority in the aviation community, or do you ever get condescended upon?
Not that I have run into. I think it's another amazing field to be a part of, and I'm sure I'm more in the GIS realm, so I'm not in aviation as much. We do fall under the U.S. Department of Transportation, so I'm in transportation. Drones are transportation, but I'm sure being out there in that field is more. It's an older demographic of men, and I'd like to be a part of that aviation world a little bit more, but as of now, I can't speak for that industry as much as GIS. In GIS, we're definitely, I'd say it's 50-50 almost. Just look at the bathroom lines. That'll tell you.
Okay. So, let me see here. Trying to skip ahead of some questions for the sake of time here. Okay. What role do you see geospatial professionals playing in addressing global challenges like climate change, urbanization, or public health? Tim, with your long track record in government, I think this is right up your alley.
Yeah, I think probably the best example was kind of COVID. We did a lot of COVID work ourselves. My team is GIS, but it's also the app dev team. So we built things that didn't exist because we had to. and GIS was like center, right? It was central to that experience. And but what I want to kind of warn folks about is we know stuff that others don't, but we shouldn't flaunt it too much, because I think people, like, I can tell from my 30 years experience, when you roll in like GIS this, GIS that, they freak out, right? I mean, it's too much. You know, you need to understand their problem, how to solve it. If it's a GIS solution, maybe even do it quietly and just present it when it's done as a GIS solution, because people still think that we're maps and that's all, and I don't need a map for this project. But it's more about data analysis, things like that. So the COVID stuff worked out really good, but because we did things that other county, we were one of the early counties in Texas to start doing dashboards, and we did it by cities, and then we were able to share with our other cities, because we were the authority. The county got the data, the cities didn't. So we were able to analyze the data for them and go, okay, Plano, here's your version of the data. Here's your version of the data, McKinney. So that part I thought really worked out well, I think. And it was really a combination of sort of technology, not just GIS, but GIS was a central part of it. So I think that, you know, my advice is subtly approach these problems as a GIS problem. Really just understand the problem and then solve it with whatever skills that you have.
So on that vein, I'm going to jump ahead of the question because this is a perfect timing. How do you effectively communicate the value of geospatial work to stakeholders and non-technical people, the lay people? How do we convey we are more than maps when that is what we are known for? Bill, your thoughts on that one?
There is no one answer or silver bullet for that. It is a context dependent question. For example, in my world, let's take it from a municipal standpoint, the city of Midland. I worked with a number of end users within and without the city. And I made it a point that when someone came in to the office, hey, can you stop? We're GIS. We can do anything. What would you like us to do? And we started out with a map, and I gave them the fundamentals that they were asking for, embellished it, and they found out very quickly that there was a whole lot more that we could contribute. And my comment to them was always, if you liked what you saw, make sure your city councilman recognizes what's going on. You play to the users that are going to be using your product, you satisfy them, and then you get feedback with it. If you come into a council chamber, if you come into an organization, or even as a consulting organization, work with someone, here I come to save the day, it's not going to work. You have to camouflage yourself as one of them. You have to learn their life, their technology, their lingo. You become one of them, and then you take over and conquer from the inside. That's the simplistic way to do it, which means if you have a chance to get some black ops training, take it. You're going to parachute in, you're going to tunnel under, you're going to cut the fence, but you have to know how to turn off the electricity in order to get inside. You have to learn how to play the political game, and the political game changes depending on the organization. And don't tell me politics doesn't exist at your organization, because I know damn well it does. It's everywhere. That's as much as I can give you.
So to that point, you're talking about going into organizations and being, dropping in and doing the special ops. Dr. Benhart has a different conundrum there, and he's got full frontal approach. He's got to blast that wall because he needs to convince somebody, a student, to take GIS. What would be your selling point for them, Dr. Benhart? Where can they go with it? Well, how are you going to convince their parents to let them take your classes?
Well, you asked about them and their parents. Those are two different answers, because if I'm trying to convince their parents now, that's going to be harder. And the reason why is they don't, one of the problems that we have in this field is that geography, right, either doesn't exist in secondary schools, or if it does, it's a world geography class, which has a lot of value in itself, in terms of, learning about the world. But Parents are, and for very understandable reasons, right? They're thinking, I need my son or daughter to pursue a program that's going to lead to a job, and hopefully a job that pays fairly well and is going to allow them to build a productive career. A lot of students' parents are not thinking geography is the route to take for that, which is continually maddening. And you've probably even heard me complain about it, Joe. I get very frustrated, right? That my son and daughter had to take X number of gym classes, and my son was a college athlete. I like gym classes, I like athletics, and had to take so many keyboarding classes. This is no lie. I told my son's advisor at the high school, the problem isn't how fast students are typing. The problem is what they're typing. Okay, they don't. So that there are a lot of schools do not have any GIS component. If parents had any exposure to that, they would connect this, because my argument to students when I talk to them and when I talk to faculty in other programs is this is going to help them get jobs. Their parents don't necessarily believe that coming in, but and what's happened now is we've been proselytizing long enough at my institution. The intro to GIS class I taught this morning probably was 75 to 80% students from other programs, biology, archaeology, safety sciences, right? Why? Because I told them this one class will help you get a job. We have program that has some, depending on how you count them, 8 to 10 GIS remote sensing courses. The more you take, the more marketable you're going to be. And that is my lead argument. If I go in, if my argument's like, hey, you get to learn about datums and planar coordinate systems, that's probably not going to be a huge selling point. And it's gotten across now. People, we all of our entry level GIS classes fill, and of course that filters into our other ones. But the continuing thorn in our side, and the real systemic problem is that in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I don't know about Texas, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there's no requirement to have any geography courses whatsoever.
Yeah, so I read those steel standards that you sent me a while back, and it's disappointing.
Right.
So I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't ask you this question, Tim. Can you discuss the value of networking and involvement in professional organizations in building a geospatial career?
I think it's key. I mean, day one, when I got this job, I called around to see who else is doing this job like I'm doing, just to create a network. And that network was like one or two people at first. Find a peer to help guide you through, whatever it is that you're working on. If you're just starting a program from scratch, I'm sure Dr. Benhart did the same when he became, started the program at Indiana University in Pennsylvania. He probably found other colleagues out there to learn how all this kind of stuff works. Again, we're at a EURISA event. This is the Ohio Valley EURISA group. Join a chapter, join a group like this. The other thing I want to share too is practice those, I hate the term soft skills, but these essential skills of how to communicate with each other. Those, we talked a lot about take programming, do all that. We're talking about tech, but the real way to convince people to see what you do and how you can help them is to be able to communicate with them. So learn, right? Practice this. I know a lot of us are introverted, right? So it's hard to get out and just talk to other folks, but that is really what we have to do. I hope, that Dr. Benhart is doing, like making you present your papers, right? To get in front of people, to get used to being out in front of folks, because that is a skill that you have to, cultivate, because that is how, when you get this job, you're going to go to a department and explain or talk or try to solve what they have to do. So networking, just going to an event or participating in something like this, is helping you develop that skill that's often not taught in college or class, that will really help you in your career long term.
And Joe, can I make a quick comment on that since Tim brought it up, and I'm really glad that he did. We do make I do make my students present their projects, and pretty much every term somebody will say, "Well, I don't like doing that. Like I don't like speaking in front of other people." And when I say to them is guess what? You know, I'm a university faculty member. I was scared as all get out whenever I had to do a public speaking a 3 minute public speaking speech in my public speaking class, and I was way more scared than that when I had to teach a class of 300 students at the University of Tennessee myself. The only way you become comfortable doing that is to do it, and if you're going to be a professional, you're going to need to do that. You're going to be and the second thing is I discovered that we had to teach a soft skill was how to write a professional email. We're having students reach out. We have our students do work for clients, and we have to schedule meetings with the clients. A couple of the clients are like, we got these rude emails from your students saying that there was only 30 minutes during the next 2 weeks that they could meet on a particular day, and that I needed to be there. And I was like, all right, let's take a step back. We have to talk about the structure of a professional email. So just to your point about soft skills, they are important.
Absolutely. And kids these days, right?
We were the same kid.
Nettie, I want your take on this because when Matt and I were going through and figuring out who we were going to ask each question to, Matt pointed out how you were involved in like everything. So what's your take on this?
Oh, well, when I was planning my escape from a previous employment with the county, I discovered volunteering. I volunteered with GIS in the Rockies. I was determined to move out to Colorado and live in the Rockies and do GIS because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, GIS was a hub. Out in Colorado was a hub for GIS, and I was determined to move out there. And I also discovered that sometimes rejection is God's protection. I'm not, I'm Catholic schoolgirl. I'm spiritual, but rejection sometimes is God's protection. And I volunteered with GIS in the Rockies. I would fly out there on my own, take my own vacation time, apply for jobs, interview for jobs, but they wanted me to move. I sold my horse to make that move, and it never happened. And I'm back in the same zip code that I grew up in, and I own a house, and I swore I would never be here, but getting involved with organizations and volunteering is your first foot in the door. And if I didn't discover that volunteering and the networks I've made through GIS in the Rockies and now Keystone GIS Board of Directors, the Shine After School program, join the planning committees at conferences. That is a great way to get involved. Volunteer with an organization, conferences, see if there's a way to volunteer to offset the conference fees. And like Bill said about 15 years ago when I reached out to him, join associations. You told me, Bill, join AAG and ERISA, and I listened, and I never looked back at that either. So get involved, volunteer, and join the associations.
Hey, I have one of those zip codes too. I'm at the one I grew up in.
I swore I'd never be here. I should be out in Denver somewhere. But here I am.
All right, so I want to open it up to Q&A. I think we only have one question so far. I do have a couple more questions I'm going to ask you guys to wrap this up, and we'll see if anybody has any questions here. So these last two questions that I have, it's going to be for everybody. I'll call you guys out. What's a question you're surprised you never got asked, but feel is important for people to consider, whether that's about the industry itself or anything? Dr. Benhart, we'll start with you.
Man, you're giving me the hard one. A question I wish I was asked, but never have been asked. why am I so interested in no one's ever really asked, I'll refer to myself as a geek in class and things like that, to try to understand that you don't have to be interested in all the same things I am to want to get into this field, right? But no one's ever really asked me why I'm so interested in the location of things. Sounds ridiculous, right? It's the primitive of everything we're talking about. And I sort of like Tim, I've always just been fascinated by not the absolute location of things, but the juxtaposition of things. And that's why I'm so interested in spatial data and the different sources of spatial data, even into, as Nettie was talking about, this small uncrewed aircraft sector now. The this feeds into the fascination of location things because it's so, let's say, easy, but it is so accessible to throw up an aircraft and get very accurate data on the location of things. And I found myself even now being fascinated. I never cared about aerial photography or videography. I had no interest in that whatsoever when I started doing the drone stuff because I wanted to make maps, right? But now when you get that aerial perspective, I'm sort of going about it backwards. Most people are initially interested in photography and videography and this other stuff, but it feeds into that because you can see the juxtaposition of Earth phenomena so easily and so much more clearly with a drone real time. So location, Joe.
Bill, what
No
has
one's
nobody ever asked you?
no one's ever asked me how, Hodge, how did you get your ugly mug plastered all over the GIS world? Well,
Hmm.
it's kind of the corollary of this. When I was 21, I profiled on LinkedIn. I sat back and waited for accolades to come rolling in. They didn't arrive. That's because you can't just put something out and expect people to come to you. You got to put yourself out. The key to my success is I met people like David DiBiase. I met people like Nettie, and I showed up and people kept seeing me next to them. You put yourself with the people who know something, who are something, and sooner or later, you get to be associated. Well, maybe he really is somebody. Since I saw him with this, I saw him over there. That's the key. You put yourself out, make yourself available. And if you're joining an organization, join a committee, work for it. If you're at a conference, I'm shy. I don't have how can I meet people? Go to a conference, step up to every vendor there and ask them a question. I guarantee you the vendor is going to occupy your time. You're going to get that professional interaction and that capability. It's meeting people and letting people know you're there. That's the whole key. Nothing magic. If I can do it, it can happen to anybody and so much better.
Tim, what question has nobody asked you?
Yeah, that was the hardest question on the list. And I
Yeah.
think the question I wish I got, and I would say I got it maybe once or twice, but more often is, how can I help them? Right. I think that, the wall has been built, the DOM exists, that it's, I don't need Tim because I don't need a map, but I think there's a lot more to it, right? The analysis of data, the things, everything we've talked about. I think there's a lot of things that we can really help with that people just don't know we're capable of helping them with. And I think that's the hardest part is it's incumbent upon us to go out and really sell what we're capable of doing that go beyond what they think we do. And so the question I wish I got more often was, Tim, can you help me? Can you help solve my problem? Can you help? And usually I have to come in either behind the scenes, like Bill said, special ops this thing to kind of show the work that we're doing. But rarely was it a launching point where, like, this is a solution that I think Tim and his group can help us with. I wish I got that question more often.
Natty, what has nobody asked you that you wish they would?
Um, we make maps, we put our heart and soul into projects. We think it's an amazing masterpiece that we make, and then you take it to the next level, and you show them your work, and nobody ever asks you, how does it feel to be criticized over the font you used, over the color scheme you chose, over the base map. And then you just want to go into hiding because you just put your heart and soul into this piece. And it's like, okay, so I would just forewarn the students, when you do get out into the real world, be ready for a little bit of criticism on your work, because not everybody's going to like that color shade of red or blue or purple that you used, and you just have to take it. You don't take it personally, and you just move on, and you fix the color, you fix the font, and you go on to the next project. So be prepared for a little bit of criticism.
Thank you. Josh, you have your hand up. If you want to go ahead and ask a question, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is more of a perspective or comment than a question, but thank you all for doing this. It's great to hear everyone's perspective, and I agree with everything everyone has said. I gave a presentation just last week to a bunch of folks who were interested in GIS and just, wanting to learn more about it. And I started off by saying, anymore GIS, if you say you're doing GIS or you're a professional in GIS, it's like saying you're a doctor, right? Are you an ENT? Are you a foot specialist? Are you a surgeon? Are you what? It has grown so much over the years that, everything that everyone has said is accurate, but I would also kind of couch it for those of you who are just getting into it in this way as well. Is you can look to be a GISP and do GIS all the time and always being up and current on everything and having that be your focus, or you could use GIS as a tool as part of your job. And so for both of those, I would say anymore, find out what you're interested in, what you really want to do, and really pursue that avenue. And in some ways, I and probably a lot of us like to know as much as we can about everything, but anymore, the field is so vast and things are changing so much that you literally cannot keep up with everything that's out there. So use GIS as as a tool to help you in whatever your pursuit is. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Josh.
Amen.
Yep.
Good job.
All right, from Luke Smith of Union County. What's one, and this is going to be one answer, whoever answers it first. What's one up and coming feature, aspect, tool, etc. of the industry that you are looking forward to utilizing in your role? Or is there anything that recently came out that you haven't gotten a chance to use yet? Who wants to take that one? Don't all speak up at once.
Nettie.
I'll call on somebody.
Yeah, I go
Nettie.
for Nettie. Your tag.
Okay. A tool that, well, obviously drones, I think, in the whole UAS field is up and coming and is going to complement GIS. But the software that I wish I was using and was getting more involved in is SiteScan, or the 3D, mapping software that goes along, that I'm sure Dr. Benhart is already teaching at IUP. But I'd like to dive into those 3D analysis tools with drones, so it's not just aerial photography.
Cool. From Jamie Christensen, if I remember correctly, owner and founder of Civic Vanguard. At what point in your career did you realize most of your time would be spent explaining what GIS is? But seriously, how do you explain GIS to someone who has never heard of it in under 30 seconds? That's the catch, 30 seconds.
I can't and I don't.
It's like maps on your phone, Joe. Now that's the first thing that I will say to people, because they'll say, they'll ask what you do in it. And I tried telling them with a longer explanation, and how much did they really want to know? Right? They wanted, so I say, so how you can see a blue dot on your phone and then there's things underneath. the blue dot that show you where you are, that's what we do. That's where that data, and it's for a very simple answer for somebody, I'm pretty sure, who's a layperson who really doesn't want a lot more than that. Since everyone has a phone and everyone's used spatially enabled apps, even just for driving directions or to find the closest, highest rated pizza restaurant, they get it.
If I can
I'd like to
interject
address
here,
the first part of that question. Like
what's
explaining, I just stopped, right? Explaining that, like explaining what GIS is. Like, I mean, he's right. I mean, that is a lot of time, but just stop using GIS up front and just kind of understanding like what it is, especially in a professional setting, like how to, solve the problem or contribute. I think that helps when you don't explain what GIS is at the front. And maybe you can explain it what it is when you're done, right? This is how we solve this problem. These are the tools that we use to solve this problem.
if I may interject, the one thing I have found to briefly explain to the layperson is I could take lots of data, more data than you can even imagine, and make it look pretty. Whether it's in the form of a map, a graph, or a chart or some sort, I could take that data and visualize it. We can organize and allow other people to make coherent decisions off of the data that you otherwise can't do anything with. Now, I find people, it's a way to separate the maps from the actual what we do behind the scenes. That's my take on it.
Great.
Let's see. We have, okay, for Dr. Benhart, for you. Do you teach? This is from Tyler Ulmer of Union County. Do you teach your students model building? On the county end, having that knowledge saves a lot of time on our end running weekly, quarterly processes on a scheduled model. So do you guys still do model building, or are you doing like Python?
Well, actually, we're doing both. So the two places where we teach it is a course called Spatial Analysis Techniques, right? Where you would be, so they're learning what the procedures are, and then they're learning how to string them together, right? So model builders are good, and obviously, you could be teaching, structuring spatial models or spatial analysis models outside of, but for example, in the Esri model builder environment. So we teach it in spatial analysis techniques, and we also teach it in our GIS programming course, because you can use model builder as an early step, right? You can just build the model and then get the code out of it. That's a little bit of a cheat, right? But then people can learn. One of the things we're talking about programming, and I would not consider myself to be, a great programmer. But I think that when we're talking about having programming in the GIS realm, it's really, really helpful to know what GIS is doing and what sequence they do it. And you can be a great Python person. But so the answer to the question is we do teach it. We teach it in a couple of intermediate to advanced courses. That would be spatial analysis techniques and GIS programming.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. This was a submitted question I did want to get to. In regions, I should preface this. This one came from Zimbabwe. It was one of the few questions I got through my story map, and it was from somebody in Zimbabwe, which I thought was phenomenal that Ohio Valley's, getting that look. But it's an interesting question. In regions with limited job opportunities, how can geospatial professionals identify their best fit when circumstances may force them to take the first available role, whether in surveying, software development, or another area? Bill, your
Well,
thoughts on this?
I'm not sure that problem exists in remote areas alone. I think that problem exists with anyone coming into GIS for that first job, or someone trapped in what they consider a dead-end job looking for another one. The best advice I can give to someone starting out and looking for a job pick out what your dream job is, but recognize that you're probably going to have to settle right out of the box. Somewhere along the way, you need to get your foot in the door. You need to get that first job, secure it. Look at the training capability, look at the opportunities that you have within that. Volunteer for some of the grunt work that no one else wants to do. You distinguish yourself by doing a better job than anybody else around you. You continually look at the job market, and you approach this as a project as effectively as you do anything that you're working for your organizational project. Look at job descriptions, look at the companies that are offering the position, look at the descriptions in terms of what they require or what they desire versus the years of experience. The more you do this, the better the feel you're going to get for the opportunities that are available to you. Then you can start to structure your own training, or if that organization doesn't offer training, you step out, join an organization, take some of the training with them, do it on your own, but plan for your career. Now you're becoming a professional, and you're taking the best opportunities that you have, and you're making that transition into the future. That's the only advice I can give you. And it's not easy feeling when you're trapped and you think that there is no way out, but there always is, and you have to exercise the patience to get forward. Patience and professionalism go together.
Thank you, Bill. Well, as we got this last 10 minutes here, I would like to ask each of you for the one piece of advice you wish you'd received at the start of your career. When you first, whether you went into your career straight out of, your geospatial career straight out of college, or you came into it later, when you first stepped into the geospatial industry, what do you wish you had known that, or what advice do you think wish you'd gotten then?
I can start.
Oh, we have a volunteer.
It took me years when I first started because I was in a one-stop, one-person GIS shop. And it wasn't until I started getting out to some of the local conferences that I recognized, wow, there are other people that are in the same boat. I'm not alone here. If you are a student, not yet graduated, already graduated, a young professional, get a profile on LinkedIn. If you want to be taken for or mistaken for a professional in this world, you need to be on LinkedIn, and you need to be actively managing your social life, as well as moving into those conferences, making a name for yourself. But the greater importance of that is that the more time you spend in that networking, the more you will understand the industry that's available to you. Instead of having Miller time where you're locked into that computer and then you go home, you're now beginning to connect to that wide, wonderful world, as ABC Sports used to say, of the profession that you are a part of. And there are folks ready to reach out a helping hand. Like Nettie said, no other industry, this is my third profession, no other industry is as helpful or as gregarious a group as the folks in GIS.
I can attest to that. One little insert here: when I was on my job hunt earlier this year, I just posted on LinkedIn. I had so many people share out that I was looking. I had people that I wasn't connected with that were beyond third connections reaching out to me and trying to help me out, which was phenomenal. It blew my mind away to have the community come together because I was willing to put myself out. Nettie, what advice do you wish you had received when you joined our awesome industry?
That the GIS industry is like family, like you said.
Yes.
And we're a tight knit group. Never burn a bridge in this industry, because we're all going to find you at a conference and we're all going to be circling back. Not that I ever have, But the GIS industry is family, and once you're in, you're hooked, and you want to be the best that you could be in this industry to support one another and elevate each other, cheer for each other. And when you see, your heroes in person at conferences, like you run into them, Tim, you might know them from LinkedIn, but when you see them in person for the first time, it's uplifting, enlightening, and it's a great feeling. So. And change is the only other constant in the world, but especially in this industry. Just be ready
Absolutely.
to adapt to change.
Dr. Benhart, what advice do you wish you had?
Two pieces quickly. The first one is continuously demonstrate your value. So, I wish I'd gotten that advice. I think I figured it out pretty quickly, but for any folks out there who are students or looking to, build a career out of this, keep in the front of your mind that whatever you're doing, whatever role you're playing, whatever organization, if you have a job now, an internship, whatever, continuously demonstrate your value to those you're working with. And if you do, people are going to have a lot of good things to say about you, which is going to lead to good things, right? You need references, but so whatever you're doing, people in your organization should feel like you're an integral part of that and you're a strong contributor. So that's one. Second, find a mentor. Find somebody who's doing the kind of things you want to do, who you think is good at doing the things you want to do. And it might be a little bit awkward, but just say to them, hey, I just really admire what you're doing and I'd like to learn from you. And it might involve, what other people said, volunteering your time and so forth. But most people, if you come up to them and say, I just really think you're great at what you do, and I really, I'd like to learn, how to do what you're doing, they're going to view that positively. They're not going to say, oh, come on, I don't have time for that. Most people are going to say, oh, well, you want to learn about what I do? Well, okay. And you can really, one, it's some networking, but two, it's really a way to sort of get into the mindset of successful people and learn what it takes to become that professional you want to become.
I can't agree with that mentor part more. I wish I had known that when I started.
Right.
And as I come to you, Tim, I think it just segues right into EURISA and the mentor program that is offered there. I actually reached out and I am part of that. And I have a mentor and we went way beyond the 6 months. We still talk weekly, and it is phenomenal having somebody that from the other side of the country even. And so we get to talk shop and, best practices. That's probably the one piece of advice I wish I had gotten when I first jumped into this career. And Tim, what advice do you wish you had getting into the geospatial industry?
Well, plus one on the mentorship. I just posted the link for EURISA, but women in GIS do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of universities do it. The Young Professional Network at Esri does it. Great programs out there. Good, to really spread your network out. And you never know how well that helps you. If you're mentoring one, it goes both ways. But the advice, and I learned this 25 years into my career, that I wish I would have taken a psychology class in college. That really all of this is about perception. All of this is about biases. All of this is about how people see what you're able to do, convincing others. When it comes right down to it, you can be the greatest programmer of all time, but you need to convince people that you're able to help them, right? And it doesn't matter the code or anything that you write or the skills that you have in that regard. Technically, it's more about getting the perception right about what you do. And I think that's, like I said, I didn't realize that there was so much involved in that than, just really the psychology of work and the psychology of doing business with others. I think that's, if you're just now starting your career, look into some of this stuff, find out about these biases that people have and how you can convince, relate, or, just deal with your perceptions of how you do work and how you do business. Because I think that really matters. I think it's, I didn't want to wrap it up this, because I know we were talking a lot about technology and career path and all that kind of stuff. But I think really just knowing your customer, knowing the people that you work with, will really you'll do well in your career.
I think it's a perfect way to wrap this up. Understanding it's not just the technical and the hard skills and soft skills, but the psychology, the mental aspect behind the things, to understand why and how we do what we do. So that was a perfect way to end this, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Bill, Nettie, Dr. Benhart, Tim, for sharing all your insights and experiences with us today. Thank everybody that was able to attend and submitting the questions that you did. I hope everybody found this as entertaining and valuable and insightful as I did. I know I learned a bunch.